What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Grimback. So this video, I wasn't gonna make this, not necessarily this topic, but I wasn't gonna make a video this early. I wanted to kind of see how some of the last ones were doing, but I got a really good comment, a really good question regarding the last video I posted. Now, if you guys haven't seen that one, the title was kind of hard to come up with just because there's so much that is covered in that video. You know, I put my story, but it does kind of encompass where I've lived, you know, the spiritual development, you know, and then kind of my personal perspective on, you know, certain ideas as far as initiations go. I explained that a little bit. But anyway, this video, I wanted to talk about something that, like I said, somebody had commented. And in the last video, I had made a reference that, you know, you see people, if you see somebody's work, you know, half off, chances are they're not very good at working. You know, if they're always advertising, always posting, it's because they don't have consistent clients already coming to them. They're always looking for new people because their shit doesn't work. So you guys might see me squinting a lot in this. It is bright as shit outside. So that's all that is. With that being said, somebody asked, what kind of things do you pay a spirit? Okay, if you go to somebody, you know, a priest, or you go to anybody who works at an ADR or ATR, once again, African diasporic religion or African traditional religion, you know, these encompass quite a bit of different systems, you know. But with that being said, almost all of them, we do our work through spirit. You know, it's not necessarily witchcraft the way that people imagine it. You know, with that word, you know, it typically represents somebody who's in a coven, you know, or is just kind of a solo witch. You know, they're do a lot of candle work, a lot of jar work, stuff like that. With that being said, that's not the way that we work. That's not the way I work. You know, we give the problems to a spirit. We do a divination. We sit down. We ask, you know, okay, here's the problem. Here's what's going on. Here's the issue. What do you need to fix it? You know, sometimes you might have a spirit that stands up for you, you know, and goes, I care about this person. You know, I want to help them. And so you do, like I said, divination. It's required. Anybody who tells you that you don't have to do divination before any type of work, I don't care if it's good work or bad work. Anybody who tells you don't need to do divination before work is fucking wrong. That's not a matter of opinion, just so you know. Divination is required. Divination, for those who don't know, I'm throwing that word out a lot, is a reading. Okay, we do readings to figure out the root of the problem, to figure out anything unseen, you know, to figure out what the spirit needs to accomplish this goal. You know, and then what they want, which brings us to the topic at hand. What kind of things do you pay a spirit? You know, and that question, I'm gonna have to be pretty, not vague, but general, because I can't speak for every single spirit. Some of them want different shit. Some of them want weird stuff. Some of them don't want any physical things at all. They want your time, you know. Think of it even, you know, and when I say spirits, I'm not just talking about the ones that I work with. I mean, you know, people go to Catholic saints for work. You know, there's a really good work with, I believe it's Saint Anthony of Padua, you know, and you bury a statue. And I'm not going to tell y'all everything. Once again, I'm not huge on teaching the things that I know. If that becomes something later on, then, you know, whatever. But as far as right now, I'm not giving no how-tos. You know, if anybody needs to understand that level of shit, message me. You know, we'll sit down. But my point being is, you know, he does work to help you sell your house quick. Make sure that you're good. Saint Expedite, sorry. So, you know, a lot of them require or ask for different things. You know, you do have some that want money. You know, in Haitian Vodou, when a spirit leaves, you know, when the spirit comes down and they possess somebody, they mount somebody, we have the conversation with them, they guide us, they do the work to help us, they let us know the things we need, the things that, you know, all these things, where stuff is, all this kind of shit. When they leave and the person comes back, we leave money on the ground so that spirit can take it with them. You know, we have Gede, which are the forgotten dead in Vodou. You know, the ancestors that were lost in the slave trade, that died in the slave trade, that were forgotten. That's the nation of Gede. okay? That's who, you know, you guys might be familiar with Baron Samedi if you've watched American Horror Story, which, God, is a terrible description of him. Um, but some of them like money. You know, you drop down some money and they'll do some work. You know, some of them, and this is a lot of the spirits that we work with. And when you become close, when you become, you have a relationship with them, you don't always have to pay them. You know, like, hey, that's my friend. I'm going to call him and go, hey, man, I need a favor. You know, I got you. Because of the time and the effort and the things that I've put in now. You see, that's the difference between people who live this and people who come to it, you know, for work and things like that. If you come to this for work, that's okay. You know, we take on clients, we help people. But yes, you have to pay for the work to be done. You know, that spirit needs something too. You know, why am I going to come out of pocket? You know, let's say he needs, okay, let's say you need a job opening, right? Or a promotion or something at your company. And I do a reading with you. We sit down, I do what I do. And my spirit tells me, okay, I need a cigar, I want some rum, and that's it, right? I'm gonna tell you, okay, I need you to come by my house with a cigar and a bottle of rum. You know, and if my spirit tells me, yes, I can do the job, yes, I can do that, I'll put him up against anybody. I'll put my spirits up against anybody. If they tell me, yes, I can do it, and you do your part, you do the thing that you're supposed to do, I would bet my entire paycheck on whatever they say is going to happen happens. I've seen it. So, you know, I'm not going to sugarcoat stuff. There are spirits out there that do want other things, you know, and that's where you get into Epstein and, you know, Bohemian Grove and a lot of these aspects that I haven't really shed too much light on. I don't particularly enjoy talking about that level of evil. You know, that's sick to me, you know, and I hope to all of you. Those spirits, Moloch, Baal, they aren't satanic in the sense that a lot of people believe. You know, they are part of the Christian pantheon of demonology, but the way they got there is because they were gods before in the Old Testament, you know, and in the Old Testament, people were still sacrificing people, you know, and animal sacrifice was a thing in the Bible, even in Christianity. You know, God had every person that believed in him kill a lamb and put the blood above the door to protect them from the plagues. If you didn't do that, you got hit, you know. These concepts are not new. They've become demonized because Christianity, after Jesus gave himself, they say, you know, there's no more sacrifice required. And for Christians, that's okay. You know, that's part of their faith. You know, even Jewish, you know, not necessarily all Jewish people, but people who still follow the Talmud, you know, and rabbis and Orthodox Jews and Hasidic Jews, a lot of times they still do animal sacrifice. They'll kill a rooster. They do a cleansing, you know, and that's something that's practiced a lot in these African traditional religions. You do have animal sacrifice, you know. There's, once again, you know, spirits are going to ask for different stuff to kind of tie it back to how I got onto this path. You know, Baal, Moloch, a lot of the ones that people are once again familiar with now because of Clinton and Epstein and Podesta and a lot of these sick individuals. You know, spirits like that take humans. They take people. That's what they want, you know. And the thing about it is, once you start a relationship, you know, with the spirit, and you give them something consistently, you have to keep that up. You can't stop. You know, I'll give you an example with La Santa Muerte. Some people know Santísima Muerte, okay? We're in this context, we're gonna refer to La Santa Blanca, okay? The lady in white, okay? Now I'm not talking about La Santa Negra, La Santa Roja, specifically La Santa Blanca. You know, she, for me, I started giving her apples, and one of the warnings I got was, okay, you know, give her as many as you want, do what you want, but every week you have to maintain that. Now, switching over to La Santa Negra, because they are different aspects of her. La Santa Blanca is going to be more forgiving, you know, more understanding, more patient. Probably not going to work as fast. La Santa Negra, that's who the cartel works with, you know. And the offerings they give her, they're giving her $15,000, you know, diamond necklaces and jewelry and dresses and, you know, all these things. And that's all well and good, and she works for them. But if they stop that, best believe they're gonna have some fucking problems, you know. So not all spirits are like that, you know. We have a lot of them that, you know, don't expect things. They want our time. They don't care about the stuff, you know. They want you to sit with them. So, you know, to kind of make this video, I guess, you know, long story long, spirits ask for different things, you know. But if a spirit tells me that he needs this to do the job and you don't get that thing, I can't guarantee the job is going to work. You know, we can ask, is there something else, or, you know, but for the most part, you know, I'm not going to compromise what they ask me, or I've got to compromise the results of what you want. You know, you can pick. So, you know, that's going to be about it for this video. If you guys want a video talking more in depth about, I mean, masonry, or, you know, the level of Luciferianism that you guys are hearing about, I don't mind making a video on that. As far as voodoo, I'll probably make a video Tuesday, kind of discussing my societe, you know, my padrino, the house, all these things. I don't mind sharing, you know, a little bit of what I can. You know, I've been doing this now for over a quarter of my life, you know, and 1 to 8 years old doesn't really count because I'm not fucking cognitively there. So for 25% of my conscious life, you know, I've dedicated myself to this, and, you know, there's some beautiful experiences in this. This is something that I'm rambling. Make a video about it. Other than that, please continue to leave some questions, comments, and concerns, y'all. I really do enjoy the feedback, hearing back from you guys. I'll continue to talk about the things you guys want. You know, I will say now, I do not give any secrets away. There will never be one single video on this channel where I give a secret away. As far as how initiations are done, I can't speak on that. You know, there's certain work, certain, you know, just certain secrets that have to be respected in this, and that I will never share. But my point being is that I can talk about voodoo for a good 5 or 6 hours, you know, before anything comes up that would even be remotely close to something like that. So we'll have a video on that if you guys want. Other than that, you guys take care, have a blessed day, and I'll see you in the next one.